With the start of my first word, my time will begin. Hey everyone, thanks for joining the First Constructive Speech and Debate podcast. This is a podcast for everything speech and debate in Texas. Our names are Ryan Stokes and Kenny Adcock, and we are excited to start this journey with you as we begin to work through the upcoming season. It is our goal to share some stories, introduce you to experts, and facilitate conversations that we hope will help you throughout your season. So, whether you are a coach, student, competitor, or a parent trying to figure out what crazy event your student is doing this year, welcome to the show. Today, we are joined by John Nichols, the speech and debate coach at Whitehouse High School outside of Tyler, Texas. John is an accomplished coach from a debate family, and he has seen high levels of success at the state and national level across all the different speech and debate events. And having coached against John personally for the past 7 years, I can attest to the strength of his program. So, for his creative CX mind and his ability to inspire his students to achieve at the highest levels, we are excited to have him on today with us. So today's conversation, everyone, is going to be about how each of us sequences teaching the different debate events and what we recommend. If you don't have a designated class period for debate, we'll also be talking about that. So with that in mind, Kenny, why don't you start us off? How do you order your classes?
So please forgive me, but before we dig into scope and sequence, I think it's really important. A couple of weeks ago, UIL announced the TILF Scholarship Award recipients, and I want to give a huge shout out to one of my students, Lane Morris, who was awarded one of the endowed scholarships at $1,500 a semester. I think that's a huge contribution, a huge and an incredible thing that UIL does. There were multi-million dollars of scholarships. I know several of friends, colleagues, that their students. I know White Oak High School had one. I know Shelbyville High School had a couple. So I know that we had a good representation in the East Texas circuit coming out of that scholarship opportunity. Not to answer your question, because again, scholarships are important, and I think it's a big thing to, so how do we get there? How do we teach the kids to get to that opportunity? For me, one of the most important pieces is team bonding, right? Like, we're going to spend an astronomical amount of Saturdays together. And so I need these kids to act like they actually like each other, because they're going to be spending a ton of time on the bus, in vans, Suburbans, making 22-plus-hour rides to Arizona and trying to figure out how not to kill each other. And so that team bonding element, becomes crucial, whether it be going to a movie together, whether it be planning a Nerf war, whether it be kidnapping a rival team's elephant and having it in a shoot off, just doing those fun things. Goal setting becomes really important, right? So I know how to hold my kids accountable and what kind of measure I want to hold my kids accountable to. So if their goal is to just make it to their first tournament, or to make it to a tournament, or if their goal is to just win a round in the season, or if their goal is to win state, right? How can I push them and best motivate them? And then we talk through event selection. We do all that kind of in the first week. We actually have a condensed week the last couple of years. So one of the big things that I've been doing is called Fancy Friday. And what I do is I require all of my kids to show up the first Friday of school in tournament-esque dress. And we do team pictures. We do individual pictures. It helps me with press releases. It helps me with outfits. It helps me hold kids accountable that, khaki shorts are not a tournament attire. So I can have that conversation early before we show up on the bus for a Saturday meet. Then we talk about team activities. We talk about a final exam that I'm instituting this school year, where we're going to institute a reflection where they're going to answer 5 questions: why they do debate, a fall goal, a spring semester goal, an individual goal for the year, and then a team goal for the year. They're going to do a ballot reflection and then a ballot collection where they have to take a picture and post their ballots. I have a document that I'd be more than willing to share with you guys and our listeners as we're going on. Then I actually transition to the events, right? Like, we actually have to teach the debate events. I start with CX debate because for me, it is the hardest bear to wrestle. And it makes, at the beginning, it made the least sense to me. So I had to do a lot of work there. Thankfully, I'm really blessed. I have a couple of really great kids who have invested in the program, and I can trust them to teach. So they do a lot of that stock issues, a lot of that inherency, disadvantage, topicality conversation. So I really depend on them a lot to teach my novice kids. I do a lot of peer mentoring in my teaching models with debate. My debate one kids, if they have in-depth questions, they can come to me. They can come to my captain system. But at the end of the day, I really depend a lot on that peer mentorship. The next event I work through is Congress, because in my opinion, it's one of the most simple events and one of the most beneficial events that we have to offer our high school students. And I think it parallels as a really good entryway to extemp. You get really designed speeches. You get really built in. They're really I hold them accountable to the 3 minutes. Your design is to hit the 3 minute and one mark. Because if you can at least speak for 3 minutes, the odds are you can take a 4 in an extemp room, because we've all seen extemp rounds where that hasn't happened. And then I partner to extemp and I start asking them to get a little longer, right? We start to try and push to that 7 minute mark, start pulling actual topics from Forensic Fanatics. I reach out to you guys. We have a good friend who's building an extemp resource that I hope we get to interview in the next couple of weeks. Let him talk a lot about that. But really build in those, teaching the kids how to use Extemp Genie, where to file, how to use sources. We do a lot of talking through the political leanings of different sources and which ones shouldn't and where's credibility and where's not credibility and why you shouldn't be citing Wikipedia. And then I moved to LD because the fall LD topic is beneficial for novices, but for our varsity kids, it doesn't really hold a lot of growth. It's more of an opportunity for them to help the novice kids who are coming in. So I kind of start working through that with the value, criterion, contentions, case construction, my specific file format that I'm working through. And then all while I'm doing that, I'm at the end of my class, I'm talking to my intern kids because I have to coach all 7 events. One man, one show, beating the drum over here. You're shaking your head, but you know that it's the beast of the small school ranks. And so while I'm doing that, I'm also talking to my intern kids. We're talking about categories. We're talking about literature. We're talking about selection. What is documentation? What wouldn't pass? What would pass? I'm really digging into that and helping kids figure out what they want to advocate for. The last thing that I cover in that, really and truly, a lot of this in that second 6 weeks is the NSDA event. So informative speaking, platform speech that's 10 minutes, not informative extemp for our listeners, original oratory, which is designed to be more persuasive, and an advocacy speech. Then we start doing Senate, which is another version of Congress, but we put our more veteran seasoned kids in that pool. Then we start doing humorous interp, dramatic interp, program oral interp. I feel like I'm missing something, but that's where we really start covering some of those NSDA events. And so that's my scope, right? I start with that team bonding and really spend a good week and a half or so on that. Then I dig into CX debate and do a really solid introduction. And then at the end of the first 6 weeks, we dig into that event selection, and that we talked about in that first couple of days, and saying, all right, cool. Which practice session do you want to come to after school? Me personally, my practice sessions are Mondays are dedicated to CX, Tuesdays are dedicated to IEs, so interp and extemp. Wednesdays are dedicated to LD and Congress. Thursdays, because I'm also our UL journalism coach, I'll dedicate to those days. And then Fridays, because I'm a yearbook guy, I have to do football games, so I have to reserve Fridays. And that's also time that I try to spend with my wife, because she would hold a gun to my head if we, didn't give our spouses and families and have that balance. And so that's kind of my sequence. That's kind of how I manage things before and after school, working that in. I will tell you that those after school sessions, if another event wants to come in, they know that they know that they can work in my space, but they also understand that on Mondays I'm CXing, on Tuesdays I'm IEing, on Wednesdays I'm LD in Congress, and Thursdays I'm journalism, that's my focus, that's where I'm going to put my priority on those given days. So that's my scope and sequence.
All right, awesome. So you start with CX and end with alphabet soup. All right. For our listeners, if you look at all the different shorthand names of the NSDA events,
hey, HIDIOIXPXCXLD.
I think you forgot Duo was the one you were trying to
Oh, yeah.
remember.
All right, and then all right, so John, I'm sure at the 5A level you probably have a different order of things from what Kenny does down at the 2A level, since he's also their journalism coach and wears more hats than he has heads. Why don't you tell us about how you scope and sequence your class?
Yeah, so last year I decided to throw like 14 years of scope and sequence out the window and just change it on the fly the first day of school because I just felt like being different. And believe it or not, it actually came out, it worked out really well for what I did, the way I scoped it. And I was genuinely surprised. By the time we got just to the end of September, I was looking at all my debate one kids going, you all need to come to my practices so we can all go to a debate tournament because you guys would all make it to out rounds or be close to medaling. You have good talent. Of course, they didn't believe me, but so this year I'm changing it up a little bit more. So with my debate one class, I do an activity called like philosophical chairs, and the whole idea is just to get the kids thinking about argumentation and what debate is on a very basic scale and showing them that they can do it. They don't realize they can do it, but they do it. We're just going to structure it a little bit more. And then it's also an introduction to argumentation, like how to write it, how to organize it. And then I'm going to be starting with extemp this year, um, simply because it's an easier way in my mind. Even if they can go 3-4 minutes, like Kenny says, they're going to do, pull mid rank in a novice tournament, no problem. But it gets them up and it gets them talking early, and it gives me a foundational work format to go with Congress. Last year I did Congress and then extemp. This year I'm going to switch it up a little bit and see if I get a little bit better response. But again, Congress being the easier one, but also on the second level is Congress is the first regional and state competition in UIL in our season. It happens in November. And so what I tell my debate one kids at the very beginning is you might not want to debate like at a tournament just yet, but you're going to be working, you're part of the debate team. So if you're not competing, you're going to be helping research, and your speeches and your prep is what we're going to be using at debate tournaments. So that's kind of the standard that I hold them to when it comes to their grades. And then we do mock Congress rounds. And I said, look, you guys can do an extemp round. Now you can do a Congress round. Then I go into CX because one, it's next in the line for UIL, but it's also my favorite. I like having fun with CX debate. That's what I grew up doing through high school.
Beavers, man.
And you two can attest that at some least my kids are able to provide some form of entertainment with some of our case selections and case writings. Go Beavers. And then from there, but because it's Congress gives them that set, okay, you're talking and arguing about policy. Now we're going to take it a step further and show you, like, we're taking that bill and we're going to make a debate case out of that bill, that idea. And then from there, we go to LD because, again, spring LD is the most important one when that's the district topic. And then OOs and informatives. Then I do judging. I do actually a block on judging. So the reason mostly and I put my debate one, I do that later in my debate one classes, but it's to show the kids it's a different viewpoint from being an observer and a judge than actually competing and doing your speeches. So they get an idea of what it's like to do both. So we don't have those problems of, well, that judge just wasn't paying attention. That judge doesn't know what they're talking about, and they get and to see what it is to think like a judge, so you can start reading the judge and reading nonverbal communication and debating for them. And then last but not least is interp. I do not teach interp. I don't do much in interp because I don't coach the interp side of things at my school. We have a different person who does that, which I think we're doing another person who in turn is probably going to throw it on me. So this year I might be doing prose and poetry, which has been a long time, but we'll see how that goes. And then with my debate two kids, this is where I kind of get, it's really similar to what Kenny does. The very beginning is goal setting and team building. And I'm very fortunate that the kids that I have, I worked very hard to institute a system where I rely heavily on my advanced debaters. I rely on my captains. It's like, guys, I am the coach in essence at tournaments. I am your sponsor for the debate program and the debate group and the club and all that, but y'all are the voice, y'all are the advocacy, you're what everyone sees. And so they do very well mentoring. They have their separate groups, like we have an interclass rivalry, like CX better than LD, which is fine. But they do very well adopting each other and working with each other and including the underclassmen to realize that it's not that scary. And if it is, you have people that can help you. So when I'm not there because I'm judging a debate rounds, they have people they can go to. But for them, we set our goals. I make them set an individual goal, like what do they want to do for growth purposes? Then it's a team, like what do they want to do tournament wise this year? What's their goals for the tournament season? And then something that we need to do to improve the program. So something that this particular group of officers wants to leave behind, what part of the legacy do they want to plant for the next group to come in, nurture, take control? Like I've tried to make it to where it's their program as much as it is the school's program. So they feel more beholden to take care of it. And then throughout the school year, specifically with my advanced debaters, like we all do extemp, no questions asked. But what then we just go in depth of in their particular events. What do they want to go advanced on? What do they have trouble with? What do they want to learn more about? And in some instances, it forces me to go and do a little bit more research. I'm a more traditional CX debater. I've had to go and do my fair share of learning of modern debate critiques and advanced stuff that personally I'm not a fan of, but they have to go and do it. But if I don't know it, I try to direct them to places to go and do it. Getting them to
Awesome.
debate camps, talking to people, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll hop in and start talking about kind of how I do mine. So I start with team bonding at the debate one level. That looks like starting with silly cases for them to argue against, like, can the kids debate me on whether or not a hot dog is actually a sandwich, right? Just to get them comfortable working together to take down a opponent, which is usually me. I want to try to foster a team sense in that one. And then on the upper side, in my advanced debate classes, as far as team bonding goes, we talk about goals that they want for the year. We talk about like our debate vlog, if we're going to have a picture wall, like what kind of inter squad competition like they want to have going on, just to kind of get them invested in the year going forward. And then hopping back down to my freshman debaters, I talk about specializing versus mandatory. And so I'll highlight all the events that we do, and I will tell them like CX, LD, Congress can be specializations. Extemp is not. It's mandatory. You're going to have to do extemp. It makes you a better debater in all three categories. Also, if they're sticker chasing for NSDA, that's a way that they can get points faster, is doing extemp on top of doing their specialized debate type. Next, I hop into Congress and extemp to start probably the second week of school. The first week, we're talking about goals. We're setting down procedures, how the debate's going to run. We're talking about our schedule. So the second week of school, I'm doing Congress and extemp, and I'm going to do that for 4 weeks. So that's going to put me into the middle to like later part of September before I finish up doing Congress and extemp. After that, time is of the essence. We have to start doing CX with my novice debaters, especially if I'm lacking a full squad in the upper levels and I'm going to have to field a team in January. I've got a lot of teaching to do there. And I will spend 6 weeks teaching novices CX, which realistically is not enough to teach them everything they need to know, but it's enough to get them not to drop their stock issues in front of a stocks judge in January. So hopefully they've at least gained some confidence by that point. Now, at that point, we're 10 weeks in, roughly, to the semester. I'm going to start talking about LD with my LDers. My varsity kids should have already been working on their stuff. and my freshmen didn't need to know about this because outside of like this is an option for later. But first, we're going to learn argumentation inside CX. Then we hop into LD. NSDA for me comes last because it's not until February. We go compete at the national qualifier. I don't currently put a lot of time into the NSDA only events. Those that cross over with UIL will enter in. So in early January, I start talking to them about NSDAs coming up. Let's look at topics. Let's talk about the differences between an NSDA tournament and a UIL tournament. Get them situated so that when we go there, we can compete and do well. So after that, after NSDA, I'm going to wrap up back around because I haven't really preached extemp at the kids since about the 4 weeks in mark of school. And I'm going to come back around and I'm going to focus in on extemp so that by the time we get to UIL district, I have my extempers up and ready to go. So that's kind of how I scope and sequence mine. Congress and extemp is the top of my cookie, and then I'm going to end up with LD and CX sandwiched in the middle, and I'll wrap back around to extemp before district to just highlight that and remind kids how to be successful in that, or clean up the little things to get them from 4 in the room to 3 in the room, or from 3 in the room to 2 and 1 in the room. And that's kind of how I scope and sequence mine. So hopefully, listeners, you've heard like 3 different ways that coaches approach it, and you'll notice there's no one set way. We all have our different ideas about what should be focused on. It really depends on the goals of your program. So I would encourage you to pick and piece from what we've said. Go talk to other coaches. Maybe email who was there before you and see if you can get a scope and sequence for how they did things. At least that way the kids are used to it. And put something together to really make your program flourish going into the season. All right, so at the top of the show, I talked about how we are all kind of blessed to have debate classes, but we weren't always blessed to have debate classes. I cannot advocate enough for you as a coach to go tell your administration that debate is a needed class. Have them tie it to whatever makes the school enough money for them to justify it financially, and also highlight that kids that do debate finish higher on every metric of academic achievement from where their baseline was. The depth of literature they're exposed to, the critical thinking, the research that they have to do, it's just an academic boost. It is on par with any AP course that they're going to be in. So advocate to your school to get you a debate class. Unfortunately, not all schools listen. We understand that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to interview Kenny and John and ask them how they made it through their time a little bit without a debate class and what their recommendations are. So with that being said, John, how many practices would you recommend after school for a teacher who doesn't have a class? And maybe what would those practices look like?
Well, it's a great question, Mr. Stokes. Really, it would come down, and first it off, like how much time are you advocating for your debate practice? So personally, for me, when I didn't have the debate class and we had to do everything after school, I managed to sit down with my kids and we worked out anywhere between 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the group that I had at the time and how much time they could, like what days could they give me. And if it was the 2 days, we aimed for about 2 hours a day, 2 hours out of that day, 2.5 hours, which gave us, and the first part of that was setting that agenda for the day. Like, okay, this is what we were working on and what we're doing. And then we end with doing a round or doing a speech of some kind, like a little bit of work here, organization of it, and then putting it into practice. And then because I was only one coach and I had to coach all the events, I would usually set one day going, okay, we're going to be focused in on CX on this day. So if you're CX debaters and extempers, this is going to be your day. This is everything we're working on. And then LD, we'll be doing your day here with extemp and everything on this side. And that's typically how I did those practices.
Okay. Awesome. Kenny, would you do anything different or?
I ask my kids a very critical question, and I would encourage coaches to do this if you don't have a class. How good do you want to be? Because they set the metric, right? I have coached my entire life living under the umbrella of I will work as hard as you do. And so if you have a team of committed kids, like I'm really blessed to have right now, that won't leave the school until 10 o'clock and you have to kick them out the door so you can go spend some time with your spouse, then you match their intensity. If you have kids that are wanting to leave at 5:30 because they need to get to Pietro's for the best pizza, or Pizza Hut that was across the street, those are the options. But I think that question needs to be wrestled with by your team, by your kids, right? And you're going to have kids that are going to show up. I know you've had a couple. I know John. I'm having the pleasure of working with one of your products right now, and she's doing a great job teaching my kids. So thank you for laying that foundation. But really, that's only the big one. And then the second one is I can't stress that practice plan enough. Right? Know what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, because you don't have time to waste.
Okay.
And don't wing it.
Yeah. With that in mind, I'm gonna ask y'all, what drills do you think would provide the most benefit for after-school team practices? And we can start with John.
Yeah, so my kids hate this part. Even my advanced kids more than anyone. It's kind of like I make them do speaker drills. So I'll put up a length of time that they have to do at the beginning of speaker drills, and then either I will put a few of them up there that I want them to do, or I let them pick and choose which they want to do. But they have to do a series of speaker drills because they do work. They do help. So anything from talking with the pen in the mouth to, you know, saying watermelon or some random other word after every word that you're saying in a speech, um, is what I have them do at the very beginning uh, of every practice, regardless of what skill level you find yourself in, varsity, JV, or hey, I was just here to get the extra credit. Guess what? Speaker
So
drill.
just as an athletic coach would require kids to work out, I think those speaker drills are important. So I'm going to run through a list, right? You've got the pin in the mouth that every competitor hates, even mine. The watermelon drill, the fastest you can backwards. But debateguru.com has an incredible list of 10 to 12. Now, I would highly encourage you 10 to 12 minutes. It doesn't need to be longer than that. If you're going longer than that, you're working out too hard and you're going to end up, overexerting yourself, and you won't get that swole rip look that, bodybuilders are looking for, or the ability to speak constructively that we're looking for in rounds.
Diminishing returns.
Okay. Awesome. So something I've noticed that you both do really well with your teams is you find opportunities for them to gain round experience outside of tournaments. Kenny, can you tell us what you do to get extra practice rounds in for your students outside of the traditional Friday, Saturday tournament?
Well, the first thing I did last year was the NSDA put out a springboard series, and it was a free round after school. That's part of why we were staying so late. It was a one-off round practice. They were done. It wasn't, the barrier was very low, and I really liked it. I think we took 77 rounds to CX State, which I think is unheard of. I mean, my kids were machines. Like, they were Tuesdays and Thursdays, we were doing NSDA springboard rounds. I mean, that's just, so that was a big one. I will tell you something that I appreciate you giving me the opportunity to talk about. Is I built a UIL springboard series that is in Tab Room that anybody can go look at. That we're going to run a one-off practice round on Tuesdays, starting at 5:30. We're going to do CX, LD, prose and poetry will be asynchronous. We'll do Congress. What I've done is I've broken up the TFA docket. Every Tuesday we're doing 1 through 3. 4 through 6, we've broken it up so you get like specific arguments, very very critical analysis in that 1.5 hour, and then I call people like you, You and John, who are looking for those rounds, who need some inter squad practice because your kids have seen the same Beavers app 17 times and they know how to beat it. Or TikTok for all those who don't understand that reference. And so that way we get some creative things. This year I did a mock district inter squad kind of thing with you guys, and that really helped. So it's just making that phone call, right? Reaching out and saying, hey, I can you do a round? Because a round is better than no rounds.
For sure. John, do you have any other ways that you might get in?
So besides networking, which is phenomenal, and I would also like to, my personal opinion, there is this mindset that like if you're inner district, you shouldn't be friends and talk to each other and share things with each other. Kenny's not part of our district because he is 2A, but like you said, Ryan and I have been competing against each other for 7 years. Get practice when you can get practice. The other one is I am fortunate that I have a lot of former debaters who call me up or email me going, hey, I got nothing to do. Would it be okay if I came over or if we had a round or something like that? And I'll be like, absolutely. And then of course I try to get guest speakers to come in who, like, for example, you mentioned Debate Family, this is where I come from, and they'll be like, yeah, happy to come up and talk to the kiddos about this or that. And they will, or they'll do like, okay, this is everything we wrote, and they'll do either like one of their fun things to do is they'll write like, I guess, have you ever did chess by mail before? Like back in the day where had a friend, you would just send a like, oh, I'm going to do this move, and then you wait for the mail to come and get to the next letter. They'll write out their debate stuff, submit it, and then I'll have somebody that I know, like for example, my dad, go, okay, da 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 da. This is what I would run. Here you go, and then they would say, okay, fix, send it back in. So
Okay.
just repeatedly, just like working, all doing it, and then we do practice rounds every moment we can. But I'm looking forward to the Springboard series with Ore City.
All right. Lightning response. Real quick. How do you, each of you, in 2 sentences, motivate students to hold them accountable to doing doc prep and case writing outside of a classroom environment?
I tie it back to their goal setting, right? Like if they wanted to go to state, like, cool, I can look at a kid who isn't doing state level work and say, you're not going to get there. And, holding kids accountable to their goals is really what it comes down to for me.
Awesome.
So for my advanced kids, it's the goals, but everyone has to post their copies of whatever their cases or ideas are so I can see them. So as we progress, I can see what work is being done and what's not. And I have some new things that I'm going to be implementing this year, not just for me to see that they're achieving, but they can measure their own success. So they don't have to come back and hear it from me or someone else that they're doing good, that they can actually take a little more accountability on their own as well, that they want to achieve that success.
Nice. Oh, there's the timer. Thank you for joining us for the First Constructive. And join us next week where we will be interviewing one of the top coaches in Texas. And once again, thank you, John, for joining us.
Thank y'all for having me.